speakers
You're
for
welcome.
the insightful session.
Thank you for having us here. Hazar.
Ladies and
guys.
gentlemen, good night.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
All right, thank you.
Fun.
Cheers. Take care.
Always fun, guys. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. To all our participants, do take this opportunity to ask questions to our speakers if you have any. And moving on to our next topic on the agenda is Thailand. Automotive manufacturing leadership in ASEAN as the industry shifts from ICE to EV. We should be moderated by Ms. Maria Lopez, Head of Research Thailand, Maybank Kim Eng Group. Over to you, Maria.
It's mute.
Oh, okay. Maria?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Did you hear my first part? Hello. So maybe I'll start again. Good morning, everyone. Sawadee ka. And our topic this time is Thailand automotive manufacturing leadership in ASEAN as the industry shifts from ICE to EV. And we are very privileged to have with us today Mr. Yeap Chuan, founder and CEO of Aapico Hitech, who has been in the industry for nearly 30 years, literally since the formative years of the automotive ICE industry. The AH is onto all sorts of auto parts, so it has interactions with all the principal manufacturers and also the secondary manufacturers here in Thailand. It is onto jigs, OEM press parts, forging, pickup chassis, as well as auto distribution. And now it has operations in Malaysia, China, and Portugal. Khun Yeap, welcome and thank you.
Yes, nice to meet you. Good morning.
Thank you. Thailand's successful entry into the global automotive industry took years of nurturing, and with the government providing privileges and incentives. And then the Japanese principals coming in, and then followed by a very lucky evolution of a winning product in a form of one-ton pickup truck. And that defines the first CAPEX cycle of the automotive industry. Then the second CAPEX cycle is redefined by introduction of the small engine passenger cars that we call here eco cars. It was not as successful as the one-ton pickup, but also still was very powerful in driving the industry forward. Now, with the Japanese principals accounting for 90% of the volumes, and Thailand being number 10 or 11 last year as a automotive producing country, I'm wondering whether the next step for Thailand in the overall shift towards electric vehicle is going to be the same. What do you think, Mr. Yeap?
I think I'd like to go back a little bit in history. Nothing happens, without going back to history. Thailand is successful in its car industry because of transformation. Yeah, the government 30 years ago, the regulations and rules are different. Yeah, as time changes, the rules and regulations transform. Yeah, so this transformation is very important. The government must understand the industry, and if the government wants the country to lead in any industry, it must understand the heartbeat and drum beats of the situation. So I think the regulations changed. And as a result, you have the pickup as the first pillar, successful in Thailand, exported globally to the whole world. And it became a world-class, high-quality product. Then, as they say, the eco car, again, all this transformation doesn't happen by chance. You have to look at the engineering change, regulatory change, yeah. Of course, Thailand now will try to lead in the EV, obviously, yeah, because there's this trend of movement towards EV. And of course, the government has set its BOI policies and tax policy. So I think it will happen. Yeah, and I think dynamic companies will take advantage of the regulatory changes and invest into this area of business for Thailand. So those are my general comments. Yeah.
Right. So if so, it's not a matter of, it's a when factor for Thailand. I mean, it will happen. This is what we can assume right now. But between ICE and EV, what are the transformation needed to facilitate the shift in such a smooth and, more importantly, profitable way?
What you're asking me is a very complicated subject. I don't think talking about history is very easy. You're like a professor when you talk about history. You're like a kindergarten child when you talk about the future. You can say anything. Yeah. Experts have forecast this, experts have forecast that. Even OEMs are struggling to forecast how the thing is changing. Okay. The forecast, when there is a dark forecast ahead, everybody is very bullish because everybody wants to be expert in a forecast because there's no responsibility in forecast, right? So therefore, the forecast is very bullish, I think, for the transformation to EV. Let's look at China, for example. Look at the classic example, China. I would say China started motorization even later than Thailand. So they have a good chance to go into EV because all the motorcycles in China are EV. So their mentality is they are used to EV. How many EV cars are there in China today? 5%. Yeah. And how many EV cars are there in China 3 years or 10 years from now? I think the forecast, as far as I know, is up to 25%. Assuming China has 14 million cars 10 years from now, vehicles, motor vehicles or vehicles on road. The maximum number of vehicles China has recorded is 30 million. So let's say 10 years, it go to 40 million. I think the forecast is 25% of 40 million. So maybe 10 million cars in China will be EV in 10 years' time. And I would say in the whole world, I think who is most aggressive? It is China. I don't think any country is more aggressive towards EV transformation than China. So 10 years from now, 25%. 20 years from now, how many percent? So I think the change, my feeling is it cannot be as fast as we like to see because the EV vehicle is also expensive. Now people are using bicycles, from bicycle to motorcycles, from motorcycle to cheap cars. So, and then to expensive cars, to Mercedes-Benz and things like that. So I think the ICE vehicle at a lower cost will still be in demand. How long it takes, transformation, I think it'll be different between countries and countries. And I would say the most aggressive country probably will be China. Yeah. So that is how I read the situation.
So two things to follow up from there in aspect of investment. One is that China is an entity of its own. We, Thailand, as a producer and exporter, which is the same role as we have today, cannot go into China or cannot sell into China. And then Europe is also shaping up to be an entity of its own as far as electric vehicles concerned. So on that basis, what is our market if we assume that auto principals will come here and build their EV facilities?
I strongly believe China will expand its car business globally. They have already have 2 brands already started in Thailand with their own assembly plants. Great Wall has bought the General Motors assembly plant. So 2 Chinese brands are here, in Asia. And Geely has invested 49% in Proton. So actually there are 3, I would say, successful Chinese brands already in Southeast Asia. So what are they going to do? From what I understand, their plans is to use Southeast Asia as the right-hand drive for their export vehicles globally. The left-hand drives will be done in China, the right-hand drives in countries like Thailand and Malaysia. Now there are 3 big Chinese companies coming out from China into Southeast Asia. Probably there'll be another 2 or 3 more coming out into this region. And there are already indicators, there are already news on this. I think China is definitely going to be a big player in automotive business in Southeast Asia and the world. They will become a global brand competing to the biggest brands in the world, I think, because they have the big volume in China. And the quality of Chinese cars have become very good. And they also understand how to handle the global market now. So if you look at the electric car, I would say in the world, let's say if there's 30% becomes electric, 10 years, 15 years, say 30% become electric. The global market is about 95 million, or if 10 years from now, could be 100 million cars. So in the world, there will be about 30 million electric cars, say 10, 15, 20 years from now. But the ICE and the hybrid may still have the 66% of the other business. So the current automotive market will still survive, because you have 66% of the business. And the other 30% or 30 million cars become electric, but the electric car will still require the parts, the body, for example, the wheels, the hubs, the suspension, the chassis. Only the engine will be transformed to a different sort of engine. But the main components of the car, or 70% of the components, will still be like from the traditional suppliers. And the traditional suppliers may have to transform themselves to adjust to the needs of the EV. For example, the body may be changed to aluminum instead of steel, but the presses but the mold or the dies may have to be adjusted because it's pressing a softer material. So technology have to move a little bit for the current auto parts suppliers.
So on the basis of this, it looks to us in the perspective of auto parts that are listed in the stock exchange of Thailand, it looks to us that this shift to EV is not going to be it is not going to require a material change on the way we do things here in Thailand. However, I'm wondering, because assuming the numbers you mentioned is what indeed will emerge over the 10 to 20 years period, it looks to me that the volume is quite small. And we have to talk about the fact that national investment in a new production facility involves a lot of capital. What is the thinking around returns on invested capital in the initial years of EV, and whether it is okay? There will probably be very low returns, but is it still okay so that the industry can actually move forward?
Okay, I'll answer your first question. For companies currently producing auto parts, if they are producing only engine parts, then they are a little bit more impacted because the EV, the ICE engine will not be used in EV. Yeah. But the EV volume is not small. If you look at the global volume, if the EV takes 30% of the market, it is something like 30 million cars. 30 million cars is a lot of business. So I think the investment is viable, 30 million cars. The whole of Thailand produces only 2 million cars. Yeah. Indonesia, maybe 2 million cars. Malaysia, less than 1 million cars. So between Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia, we produce about 5 million cars. So 30 million cars of EV is a very big volume. It's a very big business. So the ability to invest in EV definitely possible, viable, profitable, and can be a very long-term business. Same like the current auto parts that we are investing.
Right. So when we talk about 30 million as a market for an EV car manufactured here in Thailand and possibly in Malaysia, we are thinking of a global scenario where in the big markets like Europe, particularly, and maybe not China, is accessible to us producing from this part of the world and exporting all the way there. Is that the basic scenario assumption on this case?
Possible. I think the auto industry is no longer a local industry.
Mm.
Yeah. For example, there's an MCO in Malaysia. Yeah. Thailand buy parts from Malaysia, and some assembly plants here are affected. In most OEM, they buy the parts globally. They may be 50% or 80% may be produced in one country. Yeah, but the other 30% is from various countries in the world. So there is an opportunity for business if your quality is good and your delivery is good and your price is good. Like in Thailand, our quality of our products are on 0 ppm, 0 parts per million. Our cars are based on that quality. That's why our cars can be exported to 100 countries in the world. We cannot afford to have a car having a recall in anywhere in the world. It will bankrupt the local company. So you can see that the car business is a very strict business. The demands are very, very high, and 0 parts per million is the standard we set for the parts coming out from our factories in Thailand. And the delivery is 100%. 99% is no good because there are 200 suppliers. If one supplier does not supply a part, the car cannot be assembled. So this industry is very unique. It's limited to people who have that mentality of a very excellent quality and delivery and very low price. Our business is always a price reduction in the years ahead, not a price increase. So it's a really difficult business, and you require volume in this investment.
Okay, then. So from here we can say that capex is not going to be an issue, and returns would also not be an issue if we take the assumption that big EV markets are accessible to us, and highly likely because, as you mentioned, we are global, and that there might be years, and also assuming that we are going to be 0 ppm, even at the early stage of EV adoption. You think that is not too aggressive? I mean, assuming 0 ppm immediately? Yes.
I think our business from day one, it must be 0 ppm. You cannot afford to deliver a car and then something happened. So I think there's no question about that. Every car produced in the global company must be world-class quality for export. If it's used for within a country, there's a little bit of compromise because if something goes wrong, you can repair in the same country. But if it's for an export, it must be 0 ppm. And maybe I should also alert to you about our business. It is a very fair business. If, for example, we produce a component for a pickup, yeah, say electric pickup or an ICE pickup, yeah, normally we sign a contract for 10 years and the volume is for 10 years, yeah, and we prepare our facility to support the volume for 10 years. What is the maximum volume for a month? So therefore, when we produce for 10 years, and if the volume does not reach the amount that we signed the contract, we are compensated. And if the volume is over the amount that we produce, we reduce the price to the OEM. So it's on a very open book business basis. Our business, no big profits, but it's very long term. If you get an order today for a pickup, it will last 10 years. For a passenger car, it is five years. Yeah. So it's a very stable relationship and a trustworthy relationship. And you must be very stable, financially strong, and well-managed company, this business.
Right. Okay. Based on your assessment, and also on the time horizon that you see the volume emerging to up to 30 million units, what is the IRR in investment return that is possible for the likes of auto parts manufacturers? Not
This
the
is a
engine.
difficult question. Yeah, if you're a high technology part, you demand a very high IRR. You can get a very high IRR. But if it's simple technology, then you get a low. So it depends on your technological level of that company. I think some of them could be very, very high because there are only 1 or 2 producers in the world. But some parts of the car, there are 100, maybe 100 people can make the same parts. So those parts are more competitive. So it depends on your technical skills and your engineering skills and the type of product that you're producing.
So let's just group them together as generic parts and high-tech parts. What is the IRR range that you can tell us based on your...
This is a difficult question. You know, how I don't know how the high-tech parts profitability is their secret. But you know, I think difficult question. But I would say we are a very stable business. Once we get a business, the contractual obligation is there. Our material price is based on a contract price, so we don't suffer from material increase because we pass through. When the material price comes down, we reduce the price because our business is very open. Yeah, it's a very transparent, long-term, trustworthy business based on quality, cost, and delivery. That is how our business run. Yeah.
So now we've taken care of the technical side and the investment side. Let's talk about the softer side of the shift from ICE to EV. The cultural dimension of this whole thing. I can see some cars here like 10 years old, 12 years old. It would seem that people do develop some sentimental value, attach some sentimental value to the cars and all that. Do you see on the social side of this that people would be ready to embrace EV? And this is on assumption that we have charging stations and that the after-sales service of EV is just as good as ICE.
This is a difficult question. If I look at myself, I've driven an EV car. Do I like an EV car? I say it's nice, yeah. It's nice to drive. But then if I drive this car a long distance, I may have to find a place to charge my EV vehicle. So it depends on how long I got to charge my EV vehicle. That's, I think, the first thing. And if the amount of time to charge is less than the, it's same like fuel, petrol, then it's fine. But if it takes half an hour or 1 hour to charge my EV vehicle, then I would not consider, yeah. Second consideration is the EV vehicle must be cheaper, yeah, cheaper to run and cheaper to maintain and cheaper to service. So I think it's a multifarious considerations that come into place. Some people may not want to use the EV because they want to feel the sound of the car, yeah. Some people may not want to use the EV because it's too expensive. So I think, and some people, of course, EV cars can also put the sound of the engine by switching on a switch, but it's not real. It's imitation sound to make the engine vroom, for example. So I think social, it also depends on the governmental support to put in charging stations, yeah, and how fast it can charge. So it would take time. I think it evolves. It must evolve. And if the evolvement of this EV is so good, then maybe the volume of EV cars may increase. But still, the cost of the vehicle and the cost of maintenance must be quite low, for example, or cheaper. But don't forget, to destroy a battery is not an easy thing. The car has a very big battery. You're talking about ESG. How do you destroy a battery? Today, even to destroy the body of the car is also a challenge. You can see cars parked on the highway, parked everywhere. Yeah, but the battery has its own problems. How do you destroy the batteries when they are used up? Batteries cannot be used forever. Yeah, maybe if you have 3 batteries, after 10 years, you can take 3 batteries and combine to 1 battery, but you may have to destroy 2 batteries. So currently, where are the batteries destroyed? No country in the world would like to dump the batteries in their country. So this is also another issue. And EV cars also have one problem. Now they have, I'm not sure in the future, the battery is potential to explode. Yeah, it can be a little bomb in your house or in the garage. If you service the car, you have to make sure there's some explosion control or explosion room when you remove the batteries. So there are things like that to consider. It takes time, I think, to see how it evolves, and evolves properly, or in the way that the people would love it in the future.
So on the basis of this, it would seem to me that just like in the early years of ICE, we need a very high level of support, incentives from the individual governments for the EV to take off. That with subsidy on the price of the car, ensuring that charging stations are just as ubiquitous as the petrol stations of today, and also ensuring the safety factor on the battery and after sales. Is that a takeaway that we can get from this section, Mr. Yeap?
I think so. I think these are the various factors that governments, society, rules and regulations, and maybe some pressure of government fleets have to be changed, things like that. So I think it's a very long-term, laborious, and each change must be positive, and people feel happy, and the cost implications are advantageous. I think that's the thing.
So this is not a race, Mr. Yeap.
Okay.
This is not a race.
It is not a?
The switch from ICE to EV is not a race. It's more like a marathon, because there are so many things that need to be fixed alongside.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I think any big change like that takes time. You have a PHEV, you have hybrid, you have hydrogen vehicle. You can see each of these changes have been started 10, 20 years ago, and which one has really materialized. Yeah. So I think it takes time. It takes time.
Right. Okay. On our last topic, before we take in the questions, you have mentioned a bit about ESG, and that is as an investment, thesis, investment criteria. And I'm just wondering, because the most often cited on the advantage of EV is because from the tailpipe, it is environmentally friendly. But you already said that the battery, the used battery, is a problem. And I also think that the rare earth and the metals that go into minerals that goes into the battery production is also a problem. Now, do you see this ESG investing as a stumbling block for the companies to access capital to start production facilities? And I think it's about $1 billion, right, per facility.
I would say it more depends on the government. Currently, the government have to subsidize for somebody to buy an EV car. Most EV cars are over $1 million. Some are 2 million. So let's use US dollars. Yeah, most EV cars are $30,000 or $40,000 to $60,000. Yeah, even with subsidy. So I think this is the first thing I think you have to look at. And if you look at ESG, if you look at the current automotive vehicle, a lot of the things can be degradable. The steel, yeah, a lot are degradable, except maybe some of the plastics and some of the rubber, yeah. But for EV car, you still have the plastics for the car, you still have the rubber tires, but you have additional big battery. So I think if you look at ESG, maybe the electric car is more severe disadvantage for ESG. I mean, in my simple mind, when I look at the current vehicle and the electric vehicle, from the point of view of ESG, okay, just on that point of view.
Okay, that is going to be interesting because sustainable finance has taken off, and it looks like it's going to be a very good funding avenue for big initiatives like shift from ICE to EV that are capital intensive, and the return, it looks like it's going to be a little bit back-ended. So we need a cheap funding. But if it's not as ESG friendly as we think it is, then funding might be an issue.
I really don't. That is. I'm not an expert on that area. Yeah, we do ESG. Yeah, sure. Our company practice. I would say if funding is an issue, then if ESG is so important, then I think like EV vehicles has to find a solution how to the carbon or whatever carbon footprint is further reduced. Yeah, how they handle the battery disposal, or the electricity that is used, is it more economical or better than the ICE? This is something which the experts have to calculate for the the effect to the environment.
So as we stand today, the science behind this is not yet there. Is that correct?
I have not seen a country in the world who say, please send your used batteries to me and I'll dump it into the sea or dump it into the soil. I think there's very few countries in the world accepting those batteries. It's a very quiet subject, I think.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we have covered the essential aspects of the shift from ICE to EV. Or is there something else that I may have missed?
I think you've covered it very well. As I said, looking at the future is very difficult. There are people who say they are experts. Are they experts? Even the global expert companies made a lot of mistakes along the way. And so really, we are making a forecast here of the future of EV. But the EV vehicles are here to stay, is here to run. Yeah. But how we're going to run in the long term, then this is something I cannot see clearly, frankly. It will run, but to what volume? Will it replace all of the ICE vehicle as some countries are projecting? I don't know. Yeah. But there are trepidations and there are challenges. Yeah. So just like everything, there are advocates for this, advocates for that. So depends what is the reality in the future. Today, there are some those people investing in EV giving a high valuation for those companies. It is a hype, a big hype. Yeah, very often when you cannot see the future and you guess the future, you think it's very bright. But when the future happens, it can be bright or it can be dark. We don't know.
Right. So with most in the equity market, as you mentioned, the valuation is very high, and so EV makers have access to funding, and for as long as the story is kept alive, then valuation will remain high and hopefully long enough so that players can raise the funds that they actually need to inject into this a very long-term project, right? And we will, as of now, we will take that as the given. The stumbling block is the science, especially on the aspect of ESG, and also on the cultural side, the social side of the shift. That would be something that needs to be addressed by the governments, which I think is a little bit poorer now because of the hit of the COVID-19. So likely that there will be a lot of negotiation between you, manufacturers and members of the supply chain, and the government on how to move this thing forward without the government having to put that many dollars into the proposition.
Yeah, but in summary, I'm not saying that EV will not come into the market. If there's 30 million EV in the world, it's still a very big business. So EV will succeed for a lot of businesses. Yeah, but the current businesses of the ICE people, they will transform and adjust because the EV car needs all the body panels and the plastic and tires and rims and things like that. So I would say, just like everything, some volume will come, whether it's 30% of the global volume, 40%. A lot of the first now is maybe 5% or 3% in the world. Let's see how it moves. But there will be a business for EV business, for the electrical components, the armature, things like that, the coils and things like that. Sure, there will be a new business coming out with this 30 million cars. There's a lot of business. Yeah, so it must come, and they'll be shared between EV, ICE, and hybrid maybe.
Okay, we can move on to the questions. I have a question in the box. Okay, Mr. Yeap, how long do you foresee for Malaysia and Thailand to embrace EV cars, given infrastructure like charging points that are still limited?
I think this question is for the prime ministers, two prime ministers of two countries. You're asking a little small little company in Thailand a very difficult question. Yeah, everybody is trying.
Right.
If there's business, there are a lot of people trying. If there's a fish in the pond, everybody will go and fish. But if there's plenty, maybe there's only one big fish, and one person will succeed to fish that big fish. The other people will be fishing, but they'll fish nothing. So I think it all depends on the government. I think how much money they're going to put in. And of course, Thailand is very aggressive on this. 2035, they want to. That has been set as a target. Malaysia has set targets as well. Yeah. So I think both countries have set quite aggressive targets. And depends on the determination of the governments and the motivation of the local populace to run with the government. And it must be good policies to make the business people and the local populace to follow.
Right. So most definitely, we need the government in this whole thing. And we need the government to actually put in more money than the private sector, yes?
I think so. Everybody must be part of the game. And everybody must believe that there is business to be done. Everybody must believe there's a future. Then I think this EV will evolve. And to what volume? I mean, that is the question.
All right. We go to the next one. How should the auto sector ecosystem in Thailand evolve in terms of technology, capability, and partnership to participate in the EV prospects? How do you view Indonesia as an alternative destination for EV production in ASEAN?
I would say I'm an auto parts supplier. I mean, I less focus on auto parts. Yeah, I think local auto parts suppliers like us, our technology is to produce the new EV engine components is quite challenging. So it has to be strong global automotive part companies to R&D and research those difficult parts. But when they want to produce the part in different parts of the world, and if they come to Thailand, then they have to look for a local partner to join together to produce the parts. So if, for example, Aapico is selected to join with a global company, then we will produce the parts locally in Thailand with the technical support of the global auto part company, or we can be joint venture partners, and gradually the Thai people will be able to learn some technology, and it will take us many years to be able to R&D on these technologies. So this is how local companies in Thailand will evolve, or the global companies may set up their own factories here to produce the EV parts for the OEMs in Thailand. So this is basically how the business evolved. And the local companies do not have enough R&D effectively to actually to produce those components or those parts meant for EV vehicles by themselves totally. But body parts and things like that, which we are familiar, we can. Yeah, transmission like the hubs or the things that we are producing now, we can. Yeah, but when it comes to more high technology parts, we have to depend on the global automotive companies who have the strong R&D overseas.
So on the basis of R&D, Indonesia will not be on the radar for a while.
I think Indonesia is probably same level as Thailand, or I'm not sure what the same level in general. So I would say they will be on the same situation as Thailand in terms of how to manufacture high technology parts. They have to joint venture, or they have to bring the global companies to invest in their country. I think that's the only way.
Right. Okay, one last question before we end the session. Do you think Vietnam can rise and one day compete with Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia in the automotive industry, especially in EV?
Motorization in Vietnam is just starting. Yeah, I think just starting. So when you are a Johnny come lately, you have a chance to go for newer technology. So I think there are some advantages like they have, just like China has some advantages over Europe or America because they are late in the motorization. Whether Vietnam has advantages over Thailand, Malaysia, or Indonesia, I really difficult to forecast because I'm not an expert of Vietnam. I've been to Vietnam. Yeah, I had investment in Vietnam. I had a joint venture with VinFast. Yeah, they are very hardworking people, very dynamic people, very cost conscious. I have an investment in China. I started about 18 years ago. The same thing. Chinese are very hungry, want to learn a lot, want to do things very quickly. So I think Vietnam has that same way of thinking because they are communist background and they are hungry. So I think this hunger will, hunger, not only hunger to improve themselves, hunger also for knowledge. Yeah, their hunger for knowledge is very strong. So this hunger for knowledge really is the difference. It makes the difference between countries. Okay. And they are not in comfort zone. I think countries with comfort zone and lack of meritocracy will face disadvantages against Vietnam.
Yes, that's clear. So I think we have reached the end of the session, and I would like to thank Mr. Yeap for sharing his views on the shift from ICE to EV, and based on his nearly 30 years in the Thailand market. Azhar? Sir,
Okay.
thank you so much for for coming and sharing your experience and thoughts on the upcoming shift from ICE to EV.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Mr. Yeap. Ladies and gentlemen, we have more interesting sessions after the break, which will resume at 2:30 p.m. Malaysia time and 1:30 p.m. Thailand, Indonesia time. Do join us and we'll see you later. Thank you.